anybody on the stream yet, but I'm gonna hang tight, you guys. Got a fantastic book here that I've been meaning to read from myself. I've been meaning to get some of this book read. Read a very little bit of it. Um, but I have not really penetrated it, and it makes me sad because it's not a long book, and yet I still haven't gotten much of it read. So we'll see if we can get a couple people in here to go through this wonderful book by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Maybe we'll do a little bit of the foreword while we're waiting for people to join. Maybe I should just start. Maybe I'll just start reading. We'll just start reading. So there's a quote here at the first chapter called My Outlook by Bodhisattva Tokme Sangpo. If the internal enemy of hatred is not tamed, when one tries to tame external enemies, they increase. Therefore, it is a practice of the wise to tame themselves by means of the forces of love and compassion. Now, I know it's kind of cliche to say that, that you ought to love all sentient beings and forgive your enemies and the like, but regardless, someone who's self-realized, they need to have that dissonance of attraction and repulsion tamed within their own psyche so that they can make choices from freedom, from a free mind, and not from being ensnared to these automatic knee-jerk reactions of love and hate, of things that we like and things that we dislike. So it's very important to cultivate first an attitude of compassion, regardless of whether that there's a situation that requires us to, protect people. I'm a security guard, so certainly, even though that I might have or try to have compassion for all sentient beings, certainly there are positions quite frequently in my life where I have to step in and be aggressive with people. Now, again, having an attitude of compassion doesn't negate the fact that as a man you might have to defend yourself or other people, or that some people deserve to to get the consequences of their actions, but rather, like I said, or rather like this quote says, if the internal enemy of hatred is not tamed, then one tries to tame external enemies, they increase. Therefore, it is the practice of the wise to tame themselves by the means of force of love and compassion. So, really, by adopting an attitude of mental clarity and kind of just non-judgmental compassion, or as they say in Tibetan Buddhism, non-referential compassion towards all sentient beings, really by doing that, what you're doing is you're freeing your heart from being ensnared by automatic knee-jerk reactions when you're going throughout your life. So absolutely, regardless of although you might have situations in your life where you have to act in one way or another, really the process of the process of having compassion for all sentient beings is really to liberate your own self, to be free to make those judgments with a clear mind. So here's the Dalai Lama. When I speak about love and compassion, I do not do so as a Buddhist, nor as a Tibetan, nor as the Dalai Lama. I do so as one human being speaking with another. I hope that you at this moment will think of yourself as a human being rather than as an American, an Asian, a European, African, or member of any particular country. these loyalties are secondary. If you and I can find common ground as human beings, we will communicate on a basic level. If I say I am a monk or I am a Buddhist, these are, in comparison to my nature as a human being, temporary. To be human is basic, the foundation from which we all arise. You are born as a human being, and that cannot change until death. All else, whether you are educated or uneducated, young or poor, young or old, rich or poor, is secondary. So, identity. It's so very easy to get wrapped up in the identity, the identification with our form and our jobs and our family and our nations and whatnot, like His Holiness is saying. But ultimately, we have the same basic nature, which he's saying as human beings, but really the same basic nature as primordially enlightened Buddhas, as spiritual sparks of God. You know, we have that same non-dual basic nature, and really, the personas and the masks that we adopt through our various incarnations, just keep obscure that basic nature. So again, by taming your own attachments and aversions and prejudices, you're coming closer to your own intrinsic nature and being able to act from that primordially free and liberated eternal nature, is what you want. Solving problems. In big cities, on farms, in remote places throughout the countryside, people are moving busily. Why? We are all motivated by the desire to make ourselves happy. To do so is right. However, we must keep in mind that too much involvement in the superficial aspects of life will not solve our larger problem of discontentment. Love, compassion, and concern for others are real sources of happiness. This is something that just blows me away, especially in the world that we live in, where money comes so fast for a very small amount of people, and everybody seems to be chasing that fleeting, transient, wealth. Everybody wants all the fanciest toys and whatnot. Um, I think people nowadays kind of think that money is a be all and end all and ends to itself. Like that if only I just acquire enough things and have enough money, then I'll be happy. But really, um, the measure of a person's happiness, between whether that they're rich or poor, is not it's not dependent on things. It's dependent on how fulfilled that person's life is, right? A person who's very poor can have a very fulfilled life. Say they have a loving family, they understand who they are, and they and even more so, like His Holiness is saying, um, really, by giving things away, by doing for others, you know, by contributing to a cause which has a higher function in the grand scheme of things in humanity. That's how you really feel happiness. It's almost like, we as human beings, we need to feel like we're doing something good, right? And goodness is often, um, goodness, it's hard. You can't really have goodness by yourself. Goodness is about how that you fit in, to the tapestry of life, to the the play of life, how you fit into it in a way which helps other people, which makes a difference, which make things better. So goodness is very seldom, something that you can just have, by yourself. And so the basic motivation of compassion, um, and the desire to do good for all sentient beings is at the core of Mahayana Buddhism. And that's really a source of happiness. How that we enter into, a relationship with our fellow humans, and all life, really, and with the world as an ecosystem and whatnot, in a fulfilling way, right? being the people are so motivated by greed nowadays and pride, which I really feel like it stems from insecurity, honestly. Why do you want to flex? Why do you need to have people see you on the fucking gram, with a $200,000 sports car? It's like there's a insecurity inside of those people, and they feel like that they'll get that validation, um, and sense of self-worth if only that they're seen, driving around in a fucking Ferrari, in LA, um, on Instagram. You know what I mean? So that's not that validation that comes from having, very valuable things, and having other people see you having valuable things. It comes from insecurity. It really does. So real fulfillment real fulfillment, um, comes from having a place in the grand scheme of things where your existence contributes to the overall goodness, of the world and of your family, of your relationships. If you can if you feel really good from the things you do, the things you say, the relationships that you have, you really feel good about yourself. That is what makes a person happy. Not by flexing on Instagram. I guarantee it. Love, compassion, and concern for others are real sources of happiness. With these in abundance, you will not be disturbed by even the most uncomfortable circumstances. If you nurse hatred, however, you will not be happy even in the lap of luxury. Thus, if we really want happiness, we must widen the sphere of love. This is both religious thinking and basic common sense. Anger cannot be overcome by anger. If a person shows anger to you and you show anger in return, the result is disaster. In contrast, if you control your anger and show its opposite, love, compassion, tolerance, and patience, then not only will you remain at peace, but the anger of others will also gradually diminish. No one can argue with the fact that in the presence of anger, peace is impossible. Only through kindness and love can peace of mind be achieved. So, peace is infectious, and it's more powerful. You know what I mean? It's like you have you have different vibrations, right? Different vibes. Anger and violence is a very low vibration, you know what I mean? And of course, it's disruptive and it's very powerful, but it can only really affect people who are underneath those vibrations, you know what I mean? And so in this world, our leaders and our the advertisers and the people that control our minds like to keep us in a low vibration, because we're easily manipulated by fear and anger, and we go out and we vote in the way that they want us to vote. And they know that people who are have a tremendous amount of inner peace, and people who are motivated by non-referential compassion, people who have lifted themselves above just the knee-jerk reaction to attachment and aversion, are impossible to manipulate. You can't manipulate those people, and so that's the last thing that the powers that be want, is for us to be in those higher vibrations, where they're not able to control us. Only human beings can judge and reason. We understand consequences and think in the long term. It is also true that human beings can develop infinite love, whereas to the best of our knowledge, animals can only have limited forms of affection and love. However, when humans become angry, all of this potential is lost. No enemy armed with mere weapons can undo these qualities, but anger can. It is the destroyer. If you look deeply into such things, the blueprint for our actions can be found within the mind. Self-defeating attitudes arise not of their own accord, but out of ignorance. Success, too, is found within ourselves. Out of self-discipline, self-awareness, and clear realization of the defects of anger and the positive effects of kindness will come peace. For instance, at present you may be a person who easily gets irritated. However, with a clear understanding and awareness, your irritability can first be undermined and then replaced. The purpose of this book is to prepare the ground for that understanding from which true love can grow. We need to cultivate the mind. Have you ever seen, or maybe you and yourself have been around somebody whose positivity and sincerity is so infectious that it like lifts you out of the dirt and the muck of those lower vibrations. It's almost like that the spirit of an enlightened mind has this like purifying power, like a water purifier. And when those somebody in those lower vibrations gets closer to this person, like the little pieces of those lower vibrations start to fade away. They're undermined, like His Holiness said, and you realize how illusory they were. You know what I mean? Sometimes enlightenment is compared to a sun, which when the sun rises, the darkness of the clouds dissipate and can't exist. So likewise, you might think that you're very depressed and angry and alone and irritated and alienated and whatnot, but as soon as the sun of that higher mind comes out, all of those things dissipate. So, like His Holiness said, if you can have real faith in your own nature, your true nature, you real faith in your true nature of the original nature, the higher self, the enlightened self, the Buddha, the whatnot. If you can have faith in that, and you see how that when that love is really cultivated within you, that it's transformative in the people around you, um, you'll be able to stand on that in any situation and be a great person. All religions teach a message of love, compassion, sincerity, and honesty. Each system seeks its own way to improve life for us all. Yet if we put too much emphasis on our own philosophy, religion, or theory, becoming too attached to it, and try to impose it on other people, the results will be trouble. Basically, all the great teachers, including Gautama Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, and Moses, were motivated by a desire to help their fellow beings. They did not seek to gain anything for themselves, nor to create more trouble in the world. And you see how that, those enlightened prophets and people and masters, they don't seek anything for themselves. They have faith in the love, the higher love in their own hearts, and in that wisdom of their primordial nature. They have faith in it, and they make themselves one with it inside of themselves, and then go out into the world and start to heal those alienated other people through their presence. And the reward is tremendous. It says in the Vimalakirti Sutra that a Buddha field of an enlightened being, a Buddha field of a bodhisattva, is made up of the aims of sentient beings. Inasmuch as a bodhisattva causes the sentient beings to cultivate enlightened qualities like morality, discipline, generosity, meditation, and as much as a bodhisattva cultivates those things, so as much as a person with that love in their hearts heals other people, that much the strength of that person's Buddha field is increased. So now, we use the references of people like Jesus, Muhammad, Shankaracharya, great sages and prophets. They are so powerful through that dynamic. They're so powerful that we talk about them thousands of years later. They're paragons, they're archetypes within the collective unconscious of enlightenment itself. It's almost like they were God manifesting in the earth. And it just came out of the strength of the fact that higher nature within yourself it's a divine intelligence. It's a reality bending transcendental object, which is capable of warping the matrix around itself. And the stronger and stronger it gets, the more that faith can move mountains. Religion may have become synonymous with deep philosophical issues, but it is love and compassion that lie at the heart of religion. Therefore, in this book, I will describe the practice of love that I also do. In experience, the practice of love brings peace of mind to myself and helps others. Foolish, selfish people are always thinking of themselves, and the result is always negative. Wise persons think of others, helping them as much as they can, and the result is happiness. So, really, the obsession with the ego is a self defeating thing. Um, you're always going to amplify your own illusions when you're fixated on um, just making yourself happy, apparently, or pleasure seeking, because you're strengthening the illusion of yourself, which is your ego. You're giving it more power by feeding it. Now, diminishing your sense of self by doing good for others, um, in the other way around, it makes your ego smaller, and it polishes the mirror of your heart so that that sun of enlightenment can reflect more. So by loving all sentient beings, now again with the caveat that just because you say the bodhicitta prayer, you say the four immeasurable minds, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, may all sentient beings have the supreme happiness which knows no suffering, may all sentient beings abide in immeasurable equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to near and far. Just because you have a mentality where you aren't looking at the egos of other people, but you're also looking at that spark of spirit which they are, and you're not talking and acting at the ego, but you're acting at the Buddha inside of them. Now, just because you're doing that doesn't mean doesn't mean that you still, might not have to protect yourself or protect other people, or that you let people take advantage of you or whatever. It doesn't mean any of those things, but it does mean that you will be more free, more independent, more clear with your decision making, and you'll have more autonomy to act, as opposed to being um, trapped by your preconceptions and prejudgments of other people. Foolish, selfish people are always thinking of themselves, and the result is always negative. Wise persons think of others, helping them as much as they can, and the result is happiness. Love and compassion are beneficial both for you and for others. Through your kindness towards others, your mind and heart will open to peace. Expanding this inner environment to the larger community around you will bring unity, harmony, and cooperation. Expanding peace further still to nations and then to the world will bring mutual trust, mutual respect, sincere communication, and finally successful joint efforts to solve the world's problems. All of this is possible, but first we must change ourselves. So I always think that, in the Satya Yuga, in the Golden Age, the Golden Ages, as they exist, people are described as living for thousands of years. There's no wars. Everybody lives in peace and security with one another. It's like the Buddha nature. It's like the enlightened. Like everyone is enlightened, right? And there's none of these like weird unconscious complexes. Like you get near somebody and you start feeling that there's intrusive thoughts, right, about maybe this person's going to take advantage of me, or all those kind of unconscious complexes. I always think that in the Golden Age, which in my view and in the view of our ancient ancestors, the world is always going through cycles of Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Dark Age. Of course, we live in the Dark Age. Now, in that Golden Age, it's like there's no unconscious complexes between people. They live in complete security with one another, and their alienation is completely resolved. So what is that? It's unity, and unity is love. So you, as an enlightened being, should internalize that Satya Yuga, that golden age, and wherever you go, you should bring that peace and that unity of the golden age of the Pure Land, and try to extend it as much as possible. It doesn't matter if we're in the dark age now. The point is that humanity can resolve their unconscious complexes. Humanity can live in a world that it really wants and needs to live in. You know, everybody from 10 years old, from a baby to an adult, everybody craves to live in that world where they're loved and respected and they feel happy. Everybody craves to live in that world. And why don't we make it, right? Why can't we make that world? It's because people are fucked up internally, and fucked up people fuck up other people, right? I curse a lot, I apologize. Fucked up people fuck up other people, right? Hurt people hurt people. So everyone needs to take a deep breath and heal their own selves and come to this golden age state inside of themselves so that they can embody it for other people. Because we all want to live in this world like that. We all want to live in a world where we're loved, um, and where we feel at one with one another. Each of us is responsible for all of humankind. We need to think of each other as brothers and sisters and be concerned with each other's welfare. We must seek to lessen the suffering of others. Rather than working solely to acquire wealth, we need to do something meaningful, something seriously directed towards the welfare of humanity as a whole. Being motivated by compassion and love, respecting the rights of others, this is real religion. To wear robes and speak about God, but think selfishly, is not a religious act. On the other hand, a politician or a lawyer with real concern for humankind who takes actions that benefit others is truly practicing religion. The goal must be to serve others, not to dominate them. Those who are wise practice love. As the Indian scholar and yogi Nagarjuna says in his precious garland of advice, having analyzed well all deeds of body, speech, and mind, those who realize what benefits self and others and always do these are wise. A religious act is performed out of good motivation with sincere thought for the benefit of others. Religion is here and now in our daily lives. If we lead that life for the benefit of the world, this is the hallmark of religious life. This is my simple religion. No need for temples, no need for complicated philosophy. Your own mind, your own heart is the temple, and your philosophy is simple kindness. So there's a profound meaning in just the basic thing that people should love each other, right? So if you're in a room with somebody, think what it is that's getting in the way of that that desire for unity that everyone has. Everyone wants to be accepted. Everyone wants to feel loved by society, accepted by their close families, and friends and relationships. People have a deep yearning for unity and for security and to be able to be themselves and feel accepted. Now, why isn't that able to happen? Why is it that when two people get into a room with one another, there's just as much a chance that they could fight? They might feel insecure with one another. Maybe they'll talk to each other and break down those barriers a little bit. But that's what we're truly here as human beings to do, is to restore the unity that was broken initially when the one all-pervading spirit broke and fragmented into all these different little pieces of itself, which contained little tiny sparks. It's our job to take those little tiny sparks and to grow it into a flame again, and to realize unity within this nascent individuation which we have as sentient beings. Stages of development. Buddhas do not wash away ill deeds with water, nor remove suffering with their hands. nor transfer their realization to others. Beings are freed through the teaching of the truth, the nature of things. In Tibet, many great scholar yogis collected the spiritual practices leading to enlightenment in volumes called The Stages on the Path to Enlightenment. These eloquent teachings of the compassionate Buddha detail a series of practices that a fortunate person can use for training in order to attain enlightenment. They distill the vast and limitless Buddhist scriptures and commentaries without sacrificing their nature of their essential arrangement. Preserved for the world in Tibet, those precious teachings are wish-fulfilling jewels for fortunate students and trainees. Stages of the Path to Enlightenment is an instrument for beginners, those who have not previously attained any spiritual heights, telling us which step to take first, and then second, and then third, and so on, not confusing what should come before and what should come after. These volumes detail the practices on which we all depend in order to attain enlightenment, gathering in one place the necessary paths, first in brief form, and then in extensive form, in accordance with the trainee's ability. This type of presentation is structured for practice that leads to understanding the path. The practices for beginners come first. When you have practiced those contemplations and received their imprint, your mind becomes capable of deeper topics, and you proceed to the next level. You train in that stage, become proficient, and move on again. It's like schooling. It's not helpful for an infant to enroll in university. Outline of the book. In this book, I will present a practical 7-step vehicle for developing love. These techniques are based on the enormous potential of humans to improve thanks to the fundamental purity of the mind. This book thus begins with an examination of whether counterproductive emotions are embedded in the fabric of mind, or whether they are peripheral to it and thus capable of being resolved. We conclude that the mind is fundamentally pure, much like the blue sky that exists behind dark clouds. Beginning with this vision, we will explore specific instructions for a practice that provides a foundation for the 7 key stages of development that follow. This practice, prior to the 7 stages, deals with overcoming our natural tendency to put others into categories such as friend or enemy. It reveals how attachment to these categories is based on our assessment of the temporary advantages and disadvantages certain people offer, a misguided approach that restricts feelings such as love and compassion. We will see how our addiction to attractiveness enhances our sympathy for some, but undercuts it for others. This initial practice is founded on a sense of equality, our common aspiration to happiness. Meditative exercises on the changeability of situations and relationships are given to help challenge the rigid categories we reflexively apply. A booster technique calls for visualizing 2 people, one full of praise and the other threatening to attack, in order to learn and recognize and change our knee-jerk responses. The steps in this foundational practice, preliminary meditations, booster techniques, and summary meditations, are like cleaning and sanding a wall before painting a mural of love. Once equanimity is cultivated, the first steps move to create a strongly positive attitude towards others in ever-widening circles. Exercises begin with choosing your best friend as a model for how to value other not-so-close friends, gradually moving outward to include neutral people, and finally enemies, those who would harm you and your friends. The hardest work here is clearing away the emotional boulders that block progress. So, what His Holiness is getting at basically is that what our minds are, our minds create ideals. The mind is an ideal factory. It's always creating ideals. And as human beings, we have the capacity for an incredible, high-level, ideal existence. And everybody recognizes that. You know, we spend all of our energy constantly talking about, why did this person do things this way? Why did this person not do this? This person should have done that. oh, I fucked up this relationship because I did this, right? It's like we know intuitively and instinctually that there is a perfect ideal of our relationships and how that we can exist in a way which is harmonious, which in which our autonomy and our uniqueness as human beings is respected, back and forth. How that we can have unity within individuality. Now I'll go on about this endlessly, but I really do feel that human beings are like God in the sense that we're autonomous, we have will, we can create from our dreams and imagine our desires, except that instead of how God is one, God decided to retract himself and experience himself in billions of different ways. And so each of us is a reflection of God, right? And now you have this thing where there are billions of pieces of God and they have to adjust relative to one another, right? And to resolve all of those all of those psychological quandaries that come out of being one and separate at the same time. Like that's the source of all of our unconscious complexes, is that we're separate and we desire unity, right? We desire to be one with one another. We need to be loved. And yet our insecurities prevent us from loving one another. So that's the quest of humanity. That's the big picture ideal of humanity. And me, I've always devoted my life ever since I got zapped on the head and became crazy. I've always devoted my life to trying to bring people into my experience of unity, of non-duality. Um, so this is what His Holiness is talking about. He's saying that in the Mahayana Buddhist path, you start with like little practices that try to turn back these unconscious reflexes which keep us from experiencing that non-dual unity with one another, that love, which is the highest ideal of human life. So basically, it's like we have two worlds, right? We have one world, which is the impure, fallen Maya world, where everyone is alienated, everyone has unconscious complexes which make them miserable. And then you have another world, right? You have the New Jerusalem, you have the Pure Land, you have the Jannah, the paradise. Um, Most religions teach that the goal of human life is to try to do good, right? And then in the afterlife, you'll get promoted to that Pure Land, to heaven. But really, the impure world and the pure world, heaven and earth, the only difference is a matter of perception. So we need to shift our perception in a way that lets us experience heaven while still on the earth. So we have work to do. We have impurity to deal with, which starts from our fixating on the ego. This is me, and I'm like this, and this is you, and you're like that, right? Which leads us to having these ingrained repulsive reflexes against one another, so that we can't just sit in a room and be in heaven with one another, which is the goal. Again, the goal is that me and you should be able to sit in a room together and be completely in heaven. There should be no fear between us, right? There should be complete love between us. And I'm sure that you guys who are watching this do feel like that with one another and with me, because we're on a higher vibration. But the question is, how do we go and bring this out into the world, right? So that's what this book is dealing with. Once equanimity is cultivated, the first step moves towards creating a strongly positive attitude towards others in ever widening circles. Exercises begin with choosing your best friend as a model for how to value other not so close friends, gradually moving outwards to include neutral people and finally enemies, those who would harm you and your friends. The hardest work here is clearing away the emotional boulders that block progress. The second step involves practical reflections on the kindness that family and close friends have shown us, especially in childhood, when we are so dependent on the attention and care of others. As we begin to achieve a deeply felt appreciation of kindness, this gratitude can gradually be extended to others beyond our circle of friends. Some exercises in this stage call for remembering kindnesses received over a number of lifetimes. One of the big things is you view all sentient beings like you are their mother, right? You think of your mother's kindness, and try to extend that to all life, remembering that throughout these infinite incarnations that we've had as various types of sentient beings, all sentient beings have been our mothers at some point. Others are aimed at appreciating services provided by others independent of their intention, as in the gifts provided by a gift provided by a clerk stocking a shelf in the local supermarket. Now, this is something that you absolutely ought to do. Um, Really, the only thing that's keeping enlightenment from manifesting moment to moment is the dust and the dullness, which is over your perception. You see things in a repeated way, and it's like you're fucking sleepwalking, right? So you ought to, like he says here, when you see a grocery store clerk stocking the shelves, right? You ought to feel incredible like gratitude for that person. Thank you so much for doing your little contribution to making sure that that food gets there on the shelf so that I can get it and take it home and nourish myself, right? I had to tell you guys a story about this. So, when I first left my kid's mother's house, we had a little bit of a falling out. Speaking of aggression and dystopias, we had a little bit of a falling out, right? So I was basically homeless for a little while, staying wherever I could. I landed in a kind of like an extended stay hotel situation. I was taking the bus back and forth to work, working long hours in the middle of the night, just trying to get enough money to keep putting a roof over my head and food in my belly. And I remember, I was on Ulmerton Road in Clearwater, and I went into a Chick-fil-A, and like I said, I had been homeless. Everything was bad, right? And I remember going into that Chick-fil-A and just I felt so fucking grateful that the fact that there were just people there that were like nice people that like were making me a chicken sandwich. I remember I just felt like incredible like gratitude. So that the problem is that we have a dullness over our perception. So how do we ameliorate that? Right? So these exercises are kind of ways to transform our perception, which is what we need to do. Um, the booster technique focuses on valuing our enemies because they provide us with unique opportunities to practice patience, tolerance, and forbearance. Now, that is a high level technique. If you can acknowledge the gifts that your haters give you, that is a high level technique. That is a high vibrational thing, that not only do you overcome your enemies by being better than them like that, but you undermine whatever that they can do to you, because you understand that what they're doing is a lesson, is a part of your karma, whatnot, and it helps you grow, helps you be stronger. When you have bad things come into you from people, and it seems like that these people are just doing terrible things to you, and you're just a victim of it, remember that this is coming from your karma, right? So you can't be, you should thank the person who's giving it to you, because they're getting that bad karma out of the way, and they're giving you an opportunity to resolve your bad karma. They're giving you the opportunities to practice patience, um, forbearance. All right. The third and fourth steps are correspondent, one strengthening the other. The third calls for reciprocating the kindness of others by developing a heroic intention to further their own enlightenment. This naturally leads to the fourth step, learning to love, which begins with acknowledging how people suffer. We will explore how the cycle of painful situations works, applying this understanding first to ourselves and then extending it to others. At this point, having progressed through earlier steps that enhance a sense of closeness with others, we can attempt a triad of exercises, gradually increasing in intensity, which expands, concerns, and finally love. The aim of the exercises up to this point is to become a friend to all beings, to have concern for their situation, and to be able to be ready to help. Now the distinction between love and attachment is drawn with more detail. By extending ordinary feelings of love and concern beyond their usual biased limits, love is freed from counterproductive attachment. This process is not a matter of seeking new, otherworldly love, but of using familiar feelings of love and applying them in ever widening spheres. The goal is to cultivate in our hearts the concern a dedicated mother feels for her child, and then to direct it towards more and more people and living beings. This is heartfelt, powerful love. I will show how these feelings serve a true understanding of human rights, not grounded in legalities or outside dictates, but rooted deeply in the heart. The fifth step is the cultivation of compassion, a deep desire to see others relieved from suffering. This is the other facet of love, a strong wish to see others happy. To be loving and compassionate towards everyone, rich or poor, healthy or sick, young or old, it is crucial to have a consistent state of a sense of their dearness while acknowledging their painful state. The practical exercises in this section create the gradual experience of mercy towards those for whom your feelings are either weak, neutral, non-existent, or even negative. A booster technique calls for imaginatively switching places with someone obviously suffering from poverty or illness. The sixth step shows how to become fully committed to altruism, and the seventh and final step turns the experience of unbiased love and compassion towards the highest aim of enlightenment, becoming more effective in helping and serving a wide variety of beings. Following the stages of the path to enlightenment will transform counterproductive emphasis on yourself into healthy concern for others. By developing your own potential, you can replace self-cherishing with other cherishing. The multitude of techniques provided for restructuring your relationships is in a more even-minded and strongly committed, loving framework will ensure that your practice is never dull. Variety will enhance and deepen your experience. Also, certain techniques may be suited to your disposition and outlook. Some methods may be easier and more effective than others. So Mahayana Buddhism has a lot of practices for cultivating the love of all sentient beings. Good one that you see in the Vajrasattva practice is you envision both your friends and your enemies taking refuge in Buddha. So you kind of wanna you wanna look at those binary categories that you have in your mind, and you see how that tension between them kind of creates a reaction in your mind, so that you're caught in viewing people with extremes of like and dislike, right? So if you can resolve those binary forces of this is my friend and this is my enemy because they treat me a certain way. If you can, through wisdom, to resolve that and have an equanimous view to, you know, good people and bad people, then you undermine that restriction on your psyche, which forces you to react in one way or another when you see quote unquote friends or enemies. And so we have Mahayana Buddhism has practices where we visualize both friends and enemies, um, both our father and our mother, both people in nations who are far away and people in our own nation. So all these different categories of how we categorize people in polar extremes, we undermine all of that by viewing them all becoming enlightened. Three, basic purity of the mind. Dharmakirti, the nature of the mind is clear light. Defilements are superficial. Is it possible to get rid of problematic emotions completely, or is it possible only to suppress them? According to a basic Buddhist insight, the mind is essentially luminous and knowing. Therefore, emotional problems do not reside in the mind's essence, such as counterproductive attitudes are temporary and superficial and can be removed. If distressing emotions such as anger were in the very nature of mind, then from its inception the mind would always have to be angry. Obviously, this is not so. Only under certain circumstances do we become angry. And when those circumstances are not present, anger is not present either. Some basic Buddhist reasoning here. What are the circumstances that serve as a basis for generating anger or hatred? When we get angry, the object of our anger appears more awful than what is actually there. You are getting angry because the person has harmed, is harming, or will harm you or your friend. So what is this I that is being harmed? In that flash of rage, we feel that both the subject I and the object the enemy are solid and independent. Because we accept these appearances as inherently established, anger is generated. However, if you think that first flash of rage, if at that first flash of rage, you make use of reason and ask yourself, who am I? Who is this one who is being hurt? What is the enemy? Is the enemy the body? Is the enemy the mind? This solidly existing enemy who previously seemed to be inherently created as something to get angry at, and this I who was inherently created to be hurt, seem to disappear, and the anger breaks apart. So, no, in a real sense, it might seem like kind of crazy, right, to you, like, who has the mental power to do that? Well, if you do spiritual practice on a daily on a day-to-day level, you will have the mental power to be able to undermine these preconceptions about self and other, which cause us to have these automated unconscious reactions which make us miserable and again prevent us from experiencing that golden enlightened unity like in the golden age with one another that we all crave. We all crave to feel that love with one another. And these presumptions that we have about our ego and whatnot, and the subsequent illusions that are generated by us, cause us to not to be able to experience our heart's desire, which we all want to experience, really. So basically, I'm saying if you do spiritual practices on a daily level, you will be able to do this and undermine those forces which make us fall prey to illusion and apply them in our relationships, which is where they need to be applied. Think about it. We get angry at what foils our desires. Anger is fomented by the misconception that the object and yourself are established this way as enemy and victim in and of themselves. Hatred is not a part of the mind's foundation. It is an attitude without a valid foundation. However, love is validly found in the truth. When over a long period an attitude that has a valid foundation competes with an attitude that does not, the one with the valid foundation will overwhelm the other. Qualities that depend on the mind can be increased limitlessly, and as you increase attitudes that counter distressing emotions, their unfavorable counterparts decrease, finally becoming extinguished altogether. Since the mind has an essential nature of luminosity and knowing, all of us have the fundamental equipment necessary to attain enlightenment. Identifying the mind. About 20 years ago, when I was in Ladakh, India, performing a series of meditations, I had a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha before me. As is still my custom, the gold leaf at the heart of the statue had worn away, and thus the area was brownish in color. As I looked at the heart of a statue which had no attractive color, watching my mind, eventually thought stopped, and for a short period I felt the luminous and knowing nature of the mind. Subsequently, when I was recollecting this, the experience would return. It is very helpful in daily practice to identify the nature of the mind and concentrate on it. However, it is hard to catch hold of the mind because it is hidden beneath our own scattered thoughts. As a technique to identify the basic nature of the mind, first, stop remembering what happened in the past. Then stop thinking about what might happen in the future. Let the mind flow of its own accord without the overlay of thought. Let the mind rest in its natural state and observe it for a while. When, for instance, you hear a noise, between the time of hearing it and conceptualizing its source, you can sense a state of mind devoid of thought but not asleep, in which the object is a reflection of the mind's luminosity and knowing. At such point, the basic nature of the mind can be grasped. In the beginning, when you are not used to this practice, it is quite difficult, but in time the mind appears like clear water. Try to stay with this state of mind without being distracted by conceptual thoughts and become accustomed to it. Practice this meditation early in the morning when your mind has awakened and is clear, but your senses are not yet fully operating. It helps not to have eaten too much the night before, nor to have slept too much. Your sleep will be lighter, and this makes your mind lighter and sharper the next morning. If you eat too much, your sleep can be thick and heavy, almost like a corpse. In my own daily routine, I eat my fill at breakfast and lunch, but just a little bit at night, less than half a cup of crackers. Then I go to bed early and rise at 3:30 in the morning to begin meditation. See if paying attention to the nature of the mind early in the morning makes your mind more alert throughout the day. Your thoughts certainly will be more tranquil. Your memory will improve if you are able to practice a little meditation every day, withdrawing from this scattered mind. The conceptual mind that runs on a thinking of good things and bad things and so forth will get a rest. A little non-conceptuality can provide a much-needed vacation. Now we have a meditation practice from His Holiness. So let's really quickly, we'll just do a little brief meditation with me, guys. So let me go through this with His Holiness. Let's put our shoulders back, yes. Take a couple deep breaths. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Do not think about what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. Do not think about what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. Let the mind flow of its own accord without thought. Observe the mind's nature of luminous clarity. It's not that there's nothing there. There is a clarity, natural responsiveness. It's free of impulses. That's the original nature of our mind before it becomes ensnared in illusions. You can even practice this while lying in bed in the morning, your mind awake but your senses not fully engaged. Counteracting problems. Now let us take a look at counterproductive emotions such as lust, hatred, and jealousy. They all depend upon the initial mistaken belief that objects exist as independent entities, whereas in fact they do not. Through the force of such ignorance, all these other distressing emotions are generated. But as we have seen, when we analyze whether this ignorance and its attendant problems are intrinsic to the nature of the mind itself, we find that, like the Indian scholar Yogi Dharmakirti says, the nature of the mind is clear light, defilements are superficial. The nature of the innermost subtle consciousness is pure. Anger, attachment, and so forth are peripheral and do not subsist in the basic mind. We call this the fundamental inborn mind of clear light. Because it makes enlightenment possible, it is also called the Buddha nature. It exists at the root of all consciousness. Also, all of us have some level of compassion despite differences in development and scope, and all of us have an intelligence that distinguishes between good and bad. These are all conditions for enlightenment. Once we know that defilements do not dwell in the nature of mind, it is possible to remove them through generating antidotes to them, attitudes that, like medicine, can counteract them. But if defilements were inseparable from our basic mind, then as long as our mind functioned, bad thoughts, anger, and so forth would have to exist, but this is not the case. At this very instant, your mind is reading and thinking. Anger is probably not present. Attitudes such as anger and attachment can be separated from the main mind. At times in our lives, our minds hold on to anger and attachment, and at other times to detachment, contentment, love, and compassion. We cannot feel desire and hatred at exactly the same time toward the very same object. We can certainly have these feelings at different times, but not in the very same moment, which shows that these two attitudes function in contradiction to each other. When one of them increases in strength, the other decreases. Valid cognition supports love and compassion. Their production needs no assistance from the ignorance that misconceives objects as inherently existing or in and of themselves alone. Non-virtuous attitudes such as hatred and pride, no matter how strong they are generated only with the assistance and support of ignorance. Therefore, without this misconception of the nature of persons and things, there's no way that desire and hatred can operate. Fortunately, consciousnesses that are the opposites of desire and hatred can operate even when there is no misconception of independent existence. Ignorance and wisdom both observe the same phenomena, but the ways they perceive them are exactly opposite. Wisdom has valid foundation, whereas ignorance has no valid foundation and mistakes what it is conceiving. Increasing the strength of wisdom weakens ignorance. Wisdom decreases the misapprehension of the nature of persons and things until ignorance disappears entirely. The problem is within. External circumstances are not what draws us into suffering. Suffering is caused and permitted by an untamed mind. The appearance of self-defeating emotions in our minds leads us to faulty actions. The naturally pure mind is covered by these emotions and troubling conceptions. The force of their deceit pushes us into faulty actions, which leads inevitably to suffering. We need, with great awareness and care, to extinguish these problematic attitudes the way gathering clouds dissolve back into the sphere of the sky. When our self-defeating attitudes, emotions, and conceptions cease, so will the harmful actions arising from them. As the great late 11th and early 12th century yogi Milarepa says, when arising within space itself, when dissolving back into space. We need to become more familiar with the state of our own minds to understand how to dissolve ill-founded ideas and impulses back into the deeper sphere of reality. The sky was there before the clouds gathered, and it will be after they have gone. It is also present when the clouds seem to cover every inch of the sky we see. The nature of water is not polluted by filth, no matter how dirty. In the same way, the nature of even a troubled mind is not polluted by defilements. The mind of clear light of any being is not polluted even by afflictive emotions like hatred. The next time you feel hatred, see if you can split off from the main run of your mind as an observer that watches hatred. Whereas we usually feel I hate, as if our sense of self and hatred are totally bound up with one another. Here you are watching hatred from a slight distance, seeing its faults, which itself naturally causes this excited state to settle down. To do this, you first need to develop an ability to watch your thoughts, since as long as all of your consciousness is steeped in conceptuality, it is difficult for thought to observe thought. But if, when thoughts arise, you're able to split off an observer that watches them, then gradually you will develop a faculty of consciousness, observing consciousness, and even at moments of hatred, a factor from within that mind will be able to step outside of the anger. By becoming familiar with consciousness as both knower and object known, you can come to recognize what is called ordinary mind, unaffected by liking and not liking, wanting and not wanting. When the mind is not fractured into so many different functions, its natural state of luminosity and knowing can be recognized. And if you stay with this, the experience of luminosity and knowing will increase. Since the inner nature of even hatred is luminous and all knowing, hatred will gradually melt into the nature of consciousness. You do not have to intentionally stop the various thoughts and feelings that dawn in the mind. Rather, do not get caught up in them. Do not let the mind be drawn into them. The mind will then take on its own natural form, and its clear light nature can be identified. Then its basic purity can be known. When you understand that clear light is the nature of your inner mind, greater and greater qualities such as love unfold. This is why mental transformation cannot be the result of making changes to your external environment. Acquiring more things once you have what is necessary cannot possibly lead to contentment. Liberation is attained by knowing the final nature of the mind itself. It is not bestowed on us by someone or something else. Happiness comes through taming the mind. Without taming the mind, there is no way to be happy. Regardless of the nature of the world, we will not suffer affliction or cause suffering when we trust in the mind's fundamental nature of luminosity, its clear light. Almost at the end, guys, and then I'm going to wrap it up after this chapter, or this section. The diamond mind. This clear light nature, basic and luminous, is the final root of our minds, forever indestructible, immutable like a diamond. In Buddhism, this aspect of the mind is considered permanent in the sense that its continuum is uninterrupted. It has always existed and will go on forever. And there is not something newly started by causes and conditions. Our basic mind is essentially pure, naturally devoid of problems from the start. Within it, all pure and impure phenomena appear as manifestations of its spontaneous nature. The unimpeded radiance of the mind is even called compassion because its effect is compassionate activities risen out of its essentially pure entity and spontaneous nature. Pure from the start and endowed with a spontaneous nature, the diamond mind is the basis of all spiritual development. Even while generating a great many good and bad conceptions such as hatred, desire, and bewilderment, the diamond mind itself is free from the corruptions of these defilements. Like the sky throughout clouds, water may be extremely dirty, yet its nature remains clear. Similarly, no matter what afflictive emotions are generated as the artifice of this diamond mind, and no matter how powerful they are, the basic mind itself remains unaffected by defilement. It is good without beginning or end. Wonderful spiritual qualities such as unbounded love and compassion are all present in the basic form in this diamond mind. Their manifestation is prevented only by certain temporary conditions. In a sense, we are enlightened from the very beginning, endowed with a completely good basic mind. By being born a human, you have taken on a physical support system through which you can easily achieve both your temporary and your larger aims. Now that you have attained this auspicious life form so unique among the myriad forms born into this world, it is important that you do not waste it. If in this situation you practice merely to attain a good life and future rebirths for yourself, you would not be using your potential fully. Or if you merely aim to liberate yourself from the tangles of suffering, this would also fall short of your inherent potential. With your humanity, you should do whatever you can to attain perfect, complete spiritual development. Thank you all very much, guys. I will have more content, more live streams, more stuff coming up here in the future. Remember to please help support my channel. You can send me a donation to esotericworldviews@gmail.com. I will put a link in the description or in the comments here to my PayPal. Hit me up with a tip on Cash App, money sign Shaktipat Seer 2. I'm gonna be coming up with some, working on some reading material. I'm working on a lot of stuff. You know, I wanna be able to do this full time and be professional. Back to doing this fully. So please help support me. Appreciate it. Peace.